Joining me on this is Alex Epstein. He is the president of the Centre for Industrial Progress and author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. So, Alex, what is your case for fossil fuels? Lay it out to me.
Yes, I think it's pretty simple. So if you care about human flourishing, by which I mean human beings living long, healthy, opportunity-filled lives, you have to acknowledge that fossil fuels have made the world an amazing place to live. And I think we should just stop there for a second, because most people who are claiming that fossil fuels are going to ruin the future do not acknowledge that fossil fuels make the present amazing. And so what that shows to me, my background is as a philosopher, is what's going on is not a scientific prediction about the future, but an anti-human evaluation about the present. Because the present is amazing. Just to take one statistic, I was born in 1980. Extreme poverty, people living under $2 a day in 1980 was 42%. Now it's under 10%. Fossil fuels have obviously driven that by providing low-cost, reliable energy for all the amazing machines that make us productive and prosperous. And yet the so-called environmentalists think that today's world, which is actually the best environment ever for humans, they think that it's terrible. That shows that they have an anti-human philosophy. And the basic idea of that philosophy is that it's immoral for humans to impact the earth, and it's inevitably going to lead to disaster for us to impact the earth. And both of those are unscientific, anti-human, really religious ideas.
So, Alex, do you think there has to be any move away from fossil fuels?
I think there has to be a move toward more fossil fuels. Because, so if you look at the world from a human flourishing perspective, there are a few billion of us who have these amazingly nourished, safe, opportunity-filled lives. And then there are billions of people who are still desperately poor, whom nobody ever cares about at all, except if they can do like a climate change ate my homework type thing, like say, oh, it hurt this place in India, so now we care about India. But nobody cares that India is desperately poor, that much of Asia is desperately poor, certainly much of Africa is desperately poor, doesn't even have electricity. Like, from a human flourishing perspective, the world needs more low-cost, reliable, global-scale energy, and fossil fuels are absolutely essential to that. So I don't have a fetish for fossil fuels, but I have a love of energy's power to improve human life and the recognition that the world needs far more energy, and for the foreseeable future, that means more fossil fuels, particularly because the so-called environmentalists have criminalized nuclear, which is the most promising non-carbon alternative.
Well, of course, and that's obviously one of the reasons why you see France flourishing, isn't it? Because they've embraced nuclear energy in a way that we haven't, for example. But
yeah,
what do you say then? And we saw that great footage there, Alex, and I can only imagine how much flack you must get at one of those protests when you're in your I Love Fossil Fuels T-shirt. Because, you know, we've got the Extinction Rebellion wreaking havoc throughout London at the moment. They say there's a climate emergency, net zero by 2050. That's not going fast enough. What do you say to them?
Yes, I think they're a perfect example of this anti-human philosophy, because their view is the world is terrible now. If you acknowledge, hey, the world is amazing now and fossil fuels make it amazing, but I'm concerned about the future, then I'll listen to you. But if you think the world is terrible now, then you're looking at the world from an anti-human perspective, particularly from the perspective that human impact is evil. So I think you can only understand Extinction Rebellion by reference to this religion that human impact is evil, and you can really understand most of what's happening in the UK by reference to that religion. Unfortunately, the UK, like, unfortunately, the current US administration, is really committing this senseless kind of suicide. I mean, everyone should know, China is 84% fossil fuels. They're using fossil fuels to produce our so-called green energy. They use far more electricity than even the US, let alone the UK, mostly comes from coal, and yet we are unilaterally sacrificing ourselves. Why? It has this quality of a religious ritual. It's not even scientifically thinking about how do you lower emissions. I don't think that should be the top priority at all, because energy matters the most. But if you want to lower emissions, focus on liberating nuclear and other cost-effective alternatives that China and India will actually use. Don't engage in this senseless self-sacrifice. So it really is this primitive religious type of attitude. It has nothing to do with science.
But what about the IPCC report, which said this is a code red for humanity? That's a whole load of scientists across the globe. And they say since 1970, global surface temperatures have risen faster than in any other 50-year period over the past 2,000 years. So they say that is actually categorical proof that fossil fuels are doing damage. How did you respond to that report?
Yes, I think the report is really bad, and then the media reporting on it makes it much worse. So the problem with the report is it commits a cardinal sin. It commits a cardinal sin of thinking. But I want to make the point. The report is terrible because the whole UN IPCC, its whole mission is to only look for negative side effects of fossil fuels and totally ignore the benefits. And I'll give you one example. Fossil fuels have helped drive down what's called the rate of climate-related disaster deaths, so how many people actually die from climate disasters. That's gone down by 98%. You would think that would be relevant in a climate report, and yet in thousands of pages, the UN never acknowledges that we're far safer from climate than ever. They talk about temperatures, but they don't talk about them from a human perspective. So this is just more evidence. They're obsessed with eliminating human impact, not advancing human flourishing. But the reports themselves don't say much about catastrophe. They don't use that kind of language much. But then the media picks it up, or the spokespeople like Guterres, the head of the UN, picks it up, and they say code red for humanity. Well, the report said nothing like that. So it's an incredibly biased report, distorted by an incredibly biased media.
So when it comes to the negative consequences, is your argument, though, Alex, that the positive things that fossil fuels bring to our lives simply outweigh those negatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge understatement. And again, you have to start with acknowledging how much they've outweighed them in the present, including how much safer we are than climate. And that rules out 99% of so-called experts today. Most experts today don't recognize how much safer we are from climate, so they're totally unqualified to talk about the future. Now, if you can say, yes, the present is amazing, but I'm concerned because CO2 levels will rise, that's a legitimate category of concern. But if you look at the nature of that, and I talk about this a lot on my website, energytalkingpoints.com, and in the book Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, basically we can expect that there will be slow, mild warming, and we're not even sure if it's net good or net bad. I mean, first of all, CO2 leads to a lot of plant growth, which people don't take seriously, but is a huge deal. And also, the warming mostly occurs in colder parts of the world, and all around the world, cold-related deaths far outweigh heat-related deaths. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at our impacts, but I'm looking at the science from a human perspective, not from this anti-human impact perspective. And when you look at the science from a human perspective, you can't even be sure that global warming is overall bad, and you can be 100 million% sure that fossil fuels benefits far outweigh any negatives, because fossil fuels really make the world a livable place. People think fossil fuels make the world unlivable. No, the world is only livable because of fossil-fueled machines producing so much value in our lives.
But you know that the Extinction Rebellion want to take us back to pre-Victorian times and have us all living on little farms and not traveling.
But does everyone in the UK know that? I'm curious. Does everyone in the UK realize that? I think they think,
of course not, because you've got loads
movement
of celebrity hypocrites like Stephen Fry and Emma Thompson, who fly all over the world on first-class jets, but then claim that they support the Extinction Rebellion, which is very interesting to me. But look, Alex Epstein, I've got my superstar panel here tonight, and I want to bring them in to join the discussion.
Oh, great.
It's the former editor.
I love your panel, by the way. You guys are very entertaining.
Yeah, they're great. They're superstars. They're superstars. So the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, Spiked Online, deputy editor. I know you did a great online interview with Spiked recently, Tom Slater, and also the GBNews presenter, head of digital here, Becca Hudson. I think I've